Okay, so you should be watching this video on the Victorian era and taking notes in your guided notes packet. We're actually going to be reading two different works from the Victorian era. We're going to read a play by this author, Oscar Wilde, and we're also going to be reading Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. They are very, very different works. The play we're going to read by Oscar Wilde is very lighthearted, very funny, but also very critical of Victorian era, whereas Charles Dickens is much darker, much more serious in its tone. And again, one is a play and one is a novel. So we are going to start by discussing Oscar Wilde, who is this man right here. He led quite an interesting life. So he was born on October 15th, 1854 in Dublin, Ireland. So he was an Irish writer. And his father was a knighted eye and ear surgeon. So he grew up in a quite wealthy family. His mother was also a writer. She was an author and a poet, and she was involved in the underground women's rights movement, which was not widely accepted during that time. The ironic thing is, even though she fought very stringently for women's rights, she ignored her own husband's own infidelities, which means he cheated on her. So even though she was all for women's rights, she kind of turned a blind eye to her husband repeatedly cheating on her. All of this led to Oscar Wilde kind of having a negative view of marriage during that time period. Now, he began with writing poetry, but his writing later expanded into novels, fairy tales, and plays. He was a very creative writer. In the plays that he wrote A Woman of No Importance, An Ideal Husband, and The Importance of Being Earnest. All three of them kind of deal with the subject of marriage, relationships, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, and poked fun at these institutions. And he wrote a novel called The Picture of Dorian Gray. This was actually on your term paper list. I don't believe anybody chose it this time around, but it's about a man who finds a way to stay young and youthful forever. So a little bit back to his life. He was married with 2 kids, but his career was completely ruined by accusations of homosexuality, and he was gay. He dressed flamboyantly, which factors into his plays, actually, and he was often seen with his friend Lord Alfred Douglas, whose father was so upset with Oscar Wilde's relationship with his son that he took him to court for homosexuality, and he was sentenced to jail for 2 years after losing this court case against his boyfriend's father. After Oscar Wilde got out of jail, he later moved to Paris, France, where homosexuality was more widely accepted, and he lived there until he died. He's actually buried in Paris now. So he died of meningitis on December 30th, 1900. So he was not very old when he died. Okay. So we are going to be reading his play called The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a social comedy and a satire. So it means that it's funny. And it deals with some of the social implications and morals of that time, but it's also a satire, which means he's poking fun at it, okay, in order to change. So his play, The Importance of Being Earnest, invented or introduced a new character called the dandy. And a dandy is a male character who pays a lot of attention to his appearance. Additionally, he doesn't seem to work very hard. He kind of lives a life of luxury. And if you might be familiar with this term from the song Yankee Doodle. Yankee Doodle, keep it up. Yankee Doodle, dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. If you actually look at the words of the song, it's about a man who is very into dancing and music and social life. He sticks macaroni in his cap, which is not a noodle. It's a feather. So he was very into his appearance as well. So pay attention to this term of the dandy when we read this play. The play is set in London, England, and the surrounding area during the late 1890s, so just before the turn of the century. And it makes fun of Victorian society and the institutions that they hold dear. The play, when it first came out, was accused of being immoral by critics. The Victorians were a very hypocritical time period. People pretended to be all buttoned up and prim and proper on the surface, but beneath the surface, there were a lot of immoral things going on. So this play was accused of being immoral because it criticized institutions like marriage and the relationships between men and women. But The Importance of Being Earnest was a critical and financial success. Anything immoral usually brings in a whole lot of money. So people were flocking to this play to buy tickets. It's still performed quite a bit today, both on stage and on screen. In fact, our Shakespeare company here in Cincinnati did it a couple years ago. And there was a movie that came out, I think I was in college, and it has Reese Witherspoon in it and Dame Judi Dench, if you're familiar with any of those actresses. So riddle me this. This is what we are going to be talking about as we read the play. Which genre of drama should this play be placed? Okay, so get ready to write these terms down. These will be important. The first term we're going to talk about is a comedy of manners, and that satirizes the manners and affectations of a certain social class by using some exaggerated stereotypes. It talks about fashions, not necessarily clothes, but what else is fashionable? Like, what are the cool places to eat? Where are the cool places in town to live? What are the cool things to do? Because fashion is not always about what you're wearing, but also what you're doing. It deals with mannerisms, not necessarily manners. It dabbles in elevated behavior. So often with comedy of manners, we're dealing with the upper echelons of society. There's more of a concern with how you seem over who you are as a person. And there's usually some sort of imposter in a comedy of manners. If you are familiar with British comedy at all, Monty Python has kept this art form alive. And I am very fond of the modern comedy Mean Girls. This is a modern comedy of manners. If you look at this picture over here, you see two fancy upper class ladies, and then you see this man sitting in the back, and she says, "I hate him. He's always talking behind my back," which is exactly what she's doing about him. So kind of we go back over to mannerisms and not manners, and elevated behavior. So let's watch a little video clip here.
Here, this map is going to be your guide to North Shore. Now, where you sit in the cafeteria is crucial because you got everybody there. You got your freshmen, ROTC guys, preps, JV jocks, Asian nerds, cool Asians, varsity jocks, unfriendly black hotties, girls who eat their feelings, girls who don't eat anything, desperate wannabes, burnouts, sexually active band geeks, the greatest people you will ever meet, and the worst. Beware of the plastic.
Okay, so as you can see from that video clip, it deals with a lot of stereotypes of people in high school. And it deals with those upper echelons of society by dealing with the alpha females at the school. So let's move on to this next term, which is farce. Farce aims to entertain the audience by means of unlikely and extravagant, yet often possible situations. So in a farce, you see an improbable plot, something that probably would never happen in real life. You have outlandish characters, and that main character passes a point of no return when admitting or realizing the truth becomes more painful than continuing. So there are often misunderstandings, there's some poetic justice, but really what you're looking for in a farce is absolutely ridiculous plot lines that you're just supposed to kind of buy into. I'm not sure if you've seen There's Something About Mary or any of the Meet the Parents films, but they fall into this concept of farce. If you've ever seen any National Lampoon's movies, I suggest you do. They are the epitome of a farce. So let's watch a little clip here.
Before we begin, since this is Aunt Bethany's 80th Christmas, I think she should lead us in the saying of grace.
Oh, great.
What, dear? Grace! Grace! She passed away 30 years ago.
They want you to say grace. The blessing.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.